Morning. We're going to begin now a Sichah on. It's printed in the Likkutei Sichos Chelik Tezayin Parshas Boi. It's the fourth Sichah there, page 122. The Sichah is, of course, Parshas Boi speaks about the Geulas Mitzrayim, how the Yidden left Mitzrayim. So but it's really a Pesach Sichah. So let's begin. Aleph. B'negedim tzivay v'ochlu chuli b'layla hazeh u'matzis goymer as der Nacht von Tesvav Nisan sein dik noch in Mitzrayim haben Yidden gedarf essen matzah. So gefit men adaver pella l'cheda. Regarding the mitzvah that they shall eat on the night matzahs on the 15th of Nisan while they're still in Mitzrayim, the Yidden were required to eat matzah Tesvav of Nisan. So we find something, something astonishing. By the Mtzivay of Achilas Matzis, L'Deidis, in Parshas Tzedei, Zokti Teda, Shivas Yamim Teichel Alav Matzis, Lechem Eini Ki B'chipazin Yatzas Meretz Mitzrayim. When the mitzvah to eat the matzahs given for future generations, in Parshas Tzedei, the Torah says that 7 days you shall eat matzahs with it, and it should be lechem oini, which means bread of poverty. And why? Because in a haste you departed from the land of Mitzrayim. And von dem lernt man up as the mitzvah, as the matzah muzayin lechem oini davke. From the Parshas Tzedei we learn that the matzahs that we eat have to be lechem oini, which means there's different ways how to make matzah. You can make bread out of water. You can make bread out of wine, oil. But in regards to the matzahs of Pesach, of course, we know it has to be lechem oini matzah. Has to be water and flour. Nitke matzah ashida cannot be enriched matzah. Let's say, for example, egg matzah. Is vibalas by Pesach Mitzrayim by Parshas Senu vert lechem oini nitermont. Now in Parshas Boi. So the lechem oini doesn't say anything that they have to eat about lechem oini. Is mashma l'cheda it implies as dem b'tov yidin gekent yitzes zayin imchiyu von achilas matzah and matzah ashira. L'cheda will come out that the yidin would be able to fulfill the obligation of eating matzah by matzah ashira, by enriched matzah. So it's interesting. In Parshas Boi, when it says how the yidin had to eat matzahs the first Pesach Tesvav of night. So it doesn't mention anything about lechem oini. It says v'ochlu b'layla hazeh matzos. Doesn't say anything about lechem oini. And Parshas Re'ei, when the Torah tells us how we have to eat matzos l'deidis, it says lechem oini. Why? Ki b'chipazin yatzas meretz Mitzrayim, because the Yidden left Mitzrayim in a haste. So the fact that the Torah does not say in Parshas Boi that the Yidden had to eat lechem oini, it's mashma that they were even yaitzu with matzah ashira with enriched matzah. Okay, so the Rebbe says, Al-Pizah verstanden. Based on this, it's understood. As-chosh by Pesach, there is muzli matzah zayin lechem oini davke, that even though, although for future generations, the matzah has to be specifically bread of poverty, is over by Gulas Mitzrayim gufa given on Ord a far matzah ashira. Before the actual exodus from Egypt, matzah ashira was used. Abradas gufa nit be'ez der yitzia from Mitzrayim. Now, even then, matzah ashira was not used while the Yidden left Mitzrayim. Right? Then the Yidden had eaten bread of poverty. Now, far the yitzia, but they only ate enriched matzah, lechem ashira, far the yitzia, prior to leaving Mitzrayim, and this is a preparation for Mitzrayim. So the Yidden were commanded, like we learned, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? The Yidden were commanded to eat already matzah on Yud Nisan already. They were commanded. So that means that the Yidden were able to eat matzah ashira before leaving Mitzrayim. Yet, when it came to when they left Mitzrayim, on actual leaving that, they had lechem oini. But beforehand, they were able to have matzah ashira.
Even then, there was no command. It was a chipason. That's why.
Right. Right. So we're going to see soon exactly why. Just because b'chipazin, why? Meaning simply, it's like because the Yidden left Mitzrayim in a haste, and they didn't have time for the dough to rise. So we have lechem aini. But there's something deeper. There's something a little bit more specific. Dafka when leaving Mitzrayim that they had to eat lechem. Say again? Exactly. Exactly. Okay. Base. Pesach Mitzrayim is their Makar v'Sherish of Pesach and Matzah Shel Deidish. Pesach Mitzrayim, the Pesach observance in Mitzrayim, is the source and the basis for Pesach and Matzah observance for the future generations. Let's move on. So this means, as the Inyan Anal by Pesach Mitzrayim, as Atzachorot Yitzis Mitzrayim is done, it's in this Mokim Oiv Matzah Ashira Davzayin Dugmasan Oich and Pesach L'Deidish. So the fact that regarding the preparation of Mitzrayim, that the Yidden were able to eat Matzah Ashira, so this idea also exists. It has to be parallel also in future observances. In other words, leaving Mitzrayim, as we know, especially Chassidus explains, is an everyday thing. It's a generational thing. It's a yearly thing. It's a daily thing. So if before the actual leaving of Mitzrayim, Yidden had this idea of Matzah Ashira, there was a place for them to have it, so it must be that we have this Matzah Ashira also before actually the Yitzis Mitzrayim of every year. Now, State in Mordechai, it's brought down in the Mordechai in Psachim. At the end of Psachim, the commentary, the Mordechai says, as Mizmach Beis Hamikdash Kayim, when the Beis Hamikdash was around, Hayoisin Kol Aseder Achar Asuda V'Le'oichlin Matzah Mitzvah Ela La'achar Shemolei Kreis Nechol. He says something very interesting. He says during the temple times, the entire Seder was held after the festival meal. And the matzah was only eaten on a full stomach. And in those days, matzah ashira, this rich matzah, was eaten during the meal. Der Seude soll nicht sein, if a matzah mit welchem wird später beim Seder mekayim sein, mitzvahs achilas matzah. Why? Because he did not want, the Mordechai says, that the bracha of Ametzi recited for the meal shouldn't be recited over the matzah with which they will eat later, during the Seder, which they fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah lechem aini. So based on the Mordechai, he says clearly that in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, they would eat matzah ashira the night of the Seder. Before actually the Seder, they would eat matzah ashira. We find a resemblance to this as well nowadays. Chosh mepravit. Them say they're farther, so that even though nowadays we know that Shulchan Aruch comes after the Seder, the din is as erev Pesach kedim shoasidis hagam b'tornit esen kein matzah. Now the halacha is that on erev Pesach, before the 10th hour, even though you're not allowed to eat matzah, it's brought down the Gemara Yerushalmi. There's very stark l'shenis. The person is not allowed to eat, even though our minig is not to eat matzah 30 days before Pesach, Shmura matzah. But the din is, according to the Gemara, in halacha, you're not allowed to eat Shmura matzah the day of Pesach, erev Pesach. Now, however, Shulchan Aruch says, the Torah brings down, the Alter Rebbe brings down that matzah shira, rich man and rich matzah, you're allowed to eat. Why? Shloimy. As a guf of Shulchan Aruch Torah is matzah lechatchila b'pashtus. So that's in that matzah ashira. The fact that the Torah allows one to eat matzah ashira before Pesach, bavais, that shows as erev Pesach v'memach the achonis to Pesach v'yitzis Mitzrayim hateri given on earth of matzah ashira. So from this, the fact that the Torah allows us to eat matzah ashira before Pesach, this that means that the preparation of matzah ashira is like required and it's necessary in order to have the lechem aini. Okay, so the Rebbe says in Gimel, in the Mtzivah von Achilas lechem aini anal is the pasuk masbet and tam matzivah. Now, this is what you were saying before. In above, when the Torah commands that you didn't have to eat the bread of poverty, the Torah explains and requires why. Ki b'chipazin yatzasam eretz Mitzrayim. Says that the Yidden, in a haste, you departed from the land of Mitzrayim, and lahispik b'tzekas lahakmitz. The dough did not have a chance to rise, to become chametz. That's bepashtus. We eat lechem oini because when the Yidden left Mitzrayim on Tesvav, by night, their dough didn't have time to rise. Now, when you say the bread of poverty excludes more than just chametz. Again, so when you say lechem oini, it comes to negate not only actual chametz, but even matzah shida, which is not chametz. Mustaber as bichipos and yotzasa chuli as the time for avos mekenit yotzazam mit matzah shida. When the Torah says for an haste you departed, it's also the reason that the obligation cannot be used. You cannot be obligated. You cannot discharge your obligation by eating matzah shida. So the Rabbi says that from verstehen, we need to understand. We need to clarify. It vas is bichipos and yotzasa atam if them vas is nit yotzim matzah shida. How does the fact that the Torah says for an haste you departed, why does that disqualify the matzah from being used to fulfill the mitzvah? In other words, I understand the resemblance of why do we eat lechem oini? Because the lechem oini, poor man's bread, the Yidden didn't have time to make enriched matzah. Okay, fine. But why are you not yetzer with matzah shida? I can understand the chatchila to have lechem oini, but why not matzah shida? Why is that? Why are you not yetzer with it? So the Rebbe says in Daled Azay, from demselben pasuk anal mas chalosei. Now, from the beginning, from the beginning of the same pasuk, it says like this: It says you shall not eat chametz with it. In other words, with korban pesach, and for 7 days you shall eat matzah. Learned up, so the Gemara in Pesachim learns out. As we can yoytze zayin the chayvas matzah nor mit dvarim haboim l'dichimutz. The Gemara learns out in Pesachim that the obligation of eating matzah can only be fulfilled with grains that can become leavened. In other words, if you use a grain that can never become chametz, you're not yoytze with it. It has to have the possibility to become chametz. Obviously, you have to make sure that it doesn't become chametz less than 18 minutes. But it has to, the grain, the concoction has to be in a way that it could become chametz. When the Sichos v'tam ki b'chipazin yotzasa gomer if them din. Now, the logical connection between what we say for in a haste you departed and this halacha, and how this serves as a svara for the halacha can be explained as follows: Yipal is by Pesach Mitzrayim is given as a botzik was hot gekent werden chometz or no mitzadem chipazin is lohispik. Since the Pesach when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, the Yidden used dough that could have become chametz, and only because of the haste, it did not have the chance to become chametz. So therefore, the matzah that we eat to commemorate Mitzrayim has to also be made of grains that could become leavened. Thus, and you have to be very careful to prevent it from becoming leaven. You have to guard it from becoming chametz. So this idea that it has to be something that prevents it from becoming chametz, we must guard it from becoming chametz to commemorate Mitzrayim, recalling that the Yidden left in a haste. They departed in a haste. When a yes as dinim. Now, since regarding both these halachas, number one, matzah shira, the connection between richer matzah and dvarim she'ein boim l'deichimutz, and concerning grains that cannot become leavened, Dr. Pasuk themselves tam. So the Torah says both reasons. The reason why about the matzah shira, and it has to be dvarim that could be chametz, in other words, things that have the ability to become chametz, Dr. Pasuk the zelba tam. So the Torah says the same reason that what? Ki b'chipazin yotzasa is the fun verstanden. So the Torah says, for an haste you departed. So from this is understood as the tzvei suge matzah hanal, that these two types of matzah haben bechlalas demselben chesaron legabi yitzayim mit dem chiyuv von achilas matzah, has the same deficiency when it comes to fulfill the obligation of eating matzah. So matzah shira and dvarim she'ein boim lidei chimutz. Sorry. So number one, enriched matzah and dvarim, things that cannot become grains that cannot become chametz, they both have the same general deficiency when it comes to fulfilling the obligation of eating matzah. Now the Rebbe says, "L'idach gisa." On the other hand, gefindmin as choshte din for matzah shira is gesagt geworden erst by Pesach l'deres kanal sif aleph. Now, even though the isser of matzah shira only went into effect for future Pesach observances, as mentioned in Sif Aleph, is aber euch by Pesach Mitzrayim shen given der klolis adin. Now, there was already the general rule by Pesach von Azah Botzik was yichel lavi lidichimus. Now, there was already a general rule that the matzah that they ate on the night of Pesach had to be made of dough that could become chametz. We learned this up in Yerushalmi from Pasuk Ushmartam Samatzis, and this is derived from the Yerushalmi. The Pasuk says, "You shall guard the matzahs," which implies as mizyotze nor mit matzah shetzrich shimmer. When it says Ushmartam Samatzis, you have to guard. What does it mean guard? It implies that a person can only fulfill his obligation with matzah that requires guarding, which means that it could become chametz. So says, which means, although when Pesach was observed in Mitzrayim, the obligation could have been fulfilled with matzah shida, but nevertheless, it had to be with dough that tzricha that needed guarding. And he gives an example. The dogma dorchanayin mishin vaser mit mei pedes was done as the isa bo lidichimotz v'adra memaheres lahachmitz. In other words, you can have, for example, by mixing water with fruit juice, as then the dough can become chametz. In fact, fruit juice hastens the leavening process even stronger. So what the Rebbe was saying in Dalid is that from the pasuk of Ki b'chipazin yatzasa meretz Mitzrayim, the beginning of the pasuk says that they should not eat chametz with the carbon pesach, and they have to eat matzah 7 days. And from here we learn that you only could use matzah, which items with liquids that could become chametz. Now, and we know that by matzah, you're not yetzer with matzah shira, and dvarim she'ein bohem chimus lidei chimutz, dvarim she'ein bohem lidei chimutz, you're also not yetzer. And the Torah says the same reason why, ki b'chipazin yatzasa. So these two things of matzah shira and dvarim she'ein bohem lidei chimutz have the same chisaron. On the other hand, even though the din is that matzah shira, you're not yetzer, and that's what was commanded by Pesach L'Deres, but by the first Mitzrayim, we said before, by the Yidden were Mitzrayim, they were allowed to eat chametz. They were allowed to eat matzah shira, and they were allowed to use things that shichel lavi lidei chimutz. So let me explain again. On the other hand, even though the din is that matzah shira was said by Pesach L'Deres, but by Pesach Mitzrayim was also the din that they had to start guarding the matzah. So they could use matzah shira, but they had to also needed things that there was also an idea of a shimmer. And the question is, we need to understand b'pnimius what's going on over here. So the Rebbe says in here as follows. This explanation from all the above in a deeper perspective is as follows. We'll understand this by first defining the difference between the bread of poverty and the matzah shira in a person's aveda. Bread of poverty is made from dough that contains only flour and water. And water also gives no flavor. Matzah shira is von an isa was wird geknoten mit yain shemen dvash oder andere meperes was given a tam in der isa. Matzah shira is made from dough that is kneaded with wine, oil, honey, and other fruits, which do give the dough. Which do give dough flavor. So again, lechem oini has no flavor. There's no water and dough. There's no water and flour. There's no flavor over there. And matzah shira has wine, oil, honey, and other fruit juices. Now, what does this mean in Aveda? The inyan in Aveda, if you translate this in Aveda, lechem eini is the Aveda from Kabbalah Sel, nit mitzat gishmak. So, lechem eini refers to serving Hashem with Kabbalah Sel. You're doing it because that's what Hashem wants. That's what Hashem requires. There's no enjoyment over there. Although a person cannot make sense intellectually of these matters, and therefore, if he cannot make sense intellectually, he cannot enjoy them. Nevertheless, for das Vegin, dient the Ebershter Mitzat Kabbalso. He serves Hashem with Mitzat Kabbalso. So that's in Lechameini. Lechameini is Kabbalso. You do it because that's what Hashem wants. Matzah Ashira is the Aveda Mitzat Tam V'das. However, when it comes to enriched matzah, that refers to serving Hashem with understanding. Was is that Aveda is Faran? Was in that Aveda is Faran Atam Geshmak, which this type of Aveda has Tam and it's enjoyable. So the Rebbe explains, page 125. Pshas, the Aveda von Ayidin is nor Mitzat Kabbalah Soil. On a Tam von Seichel Midas, when a Yid's Aveda is motivated only by Kabbalah Soil without Tam V'das, without Seichel Midas, in other words, there's no intellect or emotions, is there Doch in a Matziv, as Mitzat Seichel Midas is by him, Do, an Ort, if nit Tana Zeh, if Ra. Nor mit dem Keich von Kabbalah Soil is Keif the Menah is Kafje und is Eved Avaya. And when the Aveda is over Mitzad Tam V'das, which the Musa is on the Seichel Midas Shel the Avshedis, so then Hepech Rotz and Aliens is Do Kedai Sapcha. So the Rebbe says like this: when a Yid's Aveda is motivated by Kabbalah Soil without Tam of intellect and emotion, so his mindset is such that it's conceivable, in other words, intellectually and emotionally, to do something bad, only because he's empowered by Kabbalah Soil. Is he able to subdue the iskafia, the bad? That's iskafia, and serve Hashem. But when his avodah is a result of reason and understanding, then his seichel and midas, his intellect and emotions, automatically negate the potential for transgressing the Eibishter's will, and that's the idea of isapcha. So there's a maila. Kabbalah also has a maila that even though you don't understand it, but you still do it. But the seichel and midas still want to do bad. When a person is able to get that a seichel and midas understand that this is the right thing, then automatically he's able to negate the potential of transgressing the will of Hashem. The Rebbe says, "Und das ist der Kesher zwischen die zwei Sugei Matzah." This is how the two types of matzah work. You have matzah ashira, you have the enriched matzah, and from dvarim shein behem l'dichimutz, and you have matzah made from grain that cannot become chametz. So they connect on a deeper level. Because on a deeper level, one feature results from another. Aveda in an eifin from matzah shida b'shtem musa mitzat seichel midas is shelub derech memel the avsharas of chimetz v'ram. So the Rebbe says like this: the aveda that is performed perfectly, like matzah shida, that's like we said, is engaging a person's intellect and emotion. So when a person's intellect and emotions that will automatically prevent the possibility of chametz, of evil. And this is vidya matzah ashira k'pshuta v'as al derech hadogel can sie nit kommen lidei chimutz. This is the analogy of matzah ashira that simply cannot become chametz. In other words, unless the water is included in this batter, because fruit juice alone cannot make something chametz. That's why you always have pizza, right? It's made of fruit juice. It's not tameitzi because. Again, fruit juice alone cannot make a chametz. If you have water, then it can. So in Aveda, what's the connection between matzah ashira and dvarim she'ein lahem behen lidei chimutz? Because when a person has the Aveda matzah ashira, that is seichel and midas understand, and they're aligned properly, it will automatically prevent the possibility of chimutz and ra. Dafki the Aveda from the Chamein, Kabbalah Soil, get an earth of chametz v'ra, yochel live the chimutz. Normally, is kefet them now. There laws need to dispatch this hakba v'chimutz durch ishmartam Avedas v'yisaskus. Now, the Aveda of lechem eini, which is Kabbalah Soil, that allows for the possibility of chametz and evil, except that the evil is subdued, and any type of spreading, rising, or chametz is prevented by fulfilling Yishal Gar, which entails Aveda engagement. So what we said in Hay is as follows: the difference between lechem eini and lechem ashira, matzah ashira, is lechem eini is made up only of flour and water, which means that flour and water have no taste in it. Matzah shira has it's from breads made from juice or wine or oil, and that has flavor. And in Aveda, Lechem Oini is the Aveda of Kabbalah without any gishmak. It's beyond the Seichel, even though your Seichel Amidas don't understand it, but a person doesn't, it's at Kabbalah Sel. Now, B'Shas the Aveda is and Mashenkin Matzah Shira is the Aveda of Tam V'das. Now, when a Yid does that Aveda, just because of Kabbalah Sel, so if his intellect and emotions don't really understand it, so the Ra can still be there, but he pushes himself and he says, I'm not going to go there, I'm not going to fulfill the evil. But he doesn't transgress the evil. When the Seichel HaMidas really understand this in a real way, then he can transgress, then he can transform the evil to good. And that's the difference, that's the connection between Matzah Ashira and Dvarim. She'ein Bahem Lidei Chimutz, because it's the same thing. When a person is at a state of Matzah Ashira, that his Seichel HaMidas understand in an intellectual and emotional manner why this is the right thing to do, automatically he'll never come, the Ra will be transformed automatically. He won't have any chimutz. Shenkin Kabbalah Sel, even though it's a very high level and a person is doing it because that's what Hashem wants, it's beyond his understanding, and he has this certain bittul that he just does it because that's what Hashem wants. But nevertheless, there still has the Ra. He makes sure that the Ra doesn't come into actuality, ushmart them, but it's still there. Vav. Die zwei von der Aveda sagt sich heraus bechlal ist euch in die zwei von dem Klallen von Gula. Gula ist Mitzrayim and Gula Asira. Now, these two types of Aveda, the Aveda of Lechem Eini and the Aveda of Lechem Ashira and Matzah Ashira, are also expressed generally in the two general forms of redemption. You had the redemption of Egypt and the future redemption. By Yitzias Mitzrayim steht ki borach ha'am chipazin v'al harash b'nafshis Yisrael dain ha'ya b'tokvei. This is the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that regarding the redemption of Mitzrayim, the Torah says the people had to flee in haste. Why? The Alter Rebbe says because the evil in the souls by the Yidden are still very strong. Therefore, they had to flee the evil of the Egyptian impurity. And this is the Aveda, the Lechem Eini is the Aveda of Iskafia. Now, however, in contrast, what's going to be? However, when Mashiach comes, it says, you're not going to leave in haste, and I will remove the impurity from the land. It's going to be in a state of Hisabcha, which is Matzah Ashira. Und das ist der Bier, was Bechipas in Yitzhak says, Atam for was die Matzah von El Pesach. Can it sein Matzah Ashira? Based on this, we can understand that the reason why, since when we say Ki Bechipas and you in haste you departed, this serves as a reason that Matzah on the Seder night cannot be used with Matzah Ashira. And was is given in an Eifen von Kiborach Ha'am, Kabal Sovi Skapje, nor euch der Fahr, was in Lechem Eini und euch, I Begulas Mitzrayim, is Farana Yisra and the Gabi Matzah Shira Begul Delosulovi. So he says like this. The people had to leave in a flee, like we explained, so the Alter Rebbe says because the Ra was still B'Tokvi. Now, explains also that in a haste you departed serves as a reason that Matzah on the Seder night cannot be Matzah Ashira. Why? Because since Ki B'Chipazon you departed, because the Ra was still strong, as we explained, so the required Avodah was that of Kabbalah Sol and Iskafia, which was Lechem Eini. Okay, I'm sorry, I skipped the paragraph. Let's go back over here. When das ist der Bier von Bechipazin Yitzhak says, Atam for was die Matzah von Lil Pesach can nicht sein Matzah Ashira. Why can we not use Matzah Ashira? Und nicht von Dvarim she'en beim Lidei Chimutz. Die Baal ist Bechipazin Yitzhak sechuli v'adar Ra is nor given betokvei. Since the Ra was very, very strong, the Riber fordert sich der Avodah for Kabbalah Sol Lechem Eini. That's why you need to have Kabbalah Sol. Zayin. Das was is Pesach nicht Yetze mit Matzah Ashira. Now, this that we say that you cannot be Yetze with a enriched matzah is nit narval is nit b'deimet to Gulas Mitzrayim. Is not only because the matzah ashira is not similar to Gulas Mitzrayim, Was is given an even von Baruch as we explained, that Yidden ran away, Kabal so Viskafia canal, or Oich, der Far was in Lechem, Oini, or Eich, und as Eich, Belos Mitzrayim, is found on a Yisn, the Gabi Matzah, Ashira, Hagula Delasi. There's going to be a certain advantage from the Lechem Oini over the Matzah Ashira. In other words, there's a certain mila of the Gulas Mitzrayim over the Gula Delasi. He says like this, Chach as by Isapcha, Matzah Ashira, Vert, Dera, in ganzen Bottle, even though we explained that when it comes to Isapcha, that causes the evil to become entirely nullified, is aber da Maile in Iskafia. Nevertheless, there's also a certain advantage with the Aveda of Iskafia. Was Dafke di Aveda is verbunden mit Yigias Adam, zu Leichem sein mit Menagid und Neiten dem Ra. So he says that the Aveda of Iskafia is intertwined with the person's struggle, the person battling with his adversary and subduing the evil. He says like this, in an andere Signen, if you put it differently, the Inyan von Isabcha drückt eis, wie der Mensch wird miyuchel mit Elikus durch dem, was sich misachich bis, as ein Metzias los nit kein Ort Eifra. Says like this, Isabcha is expressed by how a person unites with godliness by refining himself such that his selfhood leaves no place for evil. In Hisabcha drückt sich aus der Bittel und wegleg zu Elikus. As Gott mit sein Seichel Midas ist dann Ra, neigt sich, tut hebig von es Monzich mit sein Metzies und is mekain der Ratzenalien. So like this. Hisabcha, like we said, it is expressed how a person unites with Hashem by refining himself such that his selfhood leaves no place for evil. Hiskafia, however, expresses a person's bittul by submission of godliness. Despite his intellect and emotions still leaving the potential of Ra, he stifles himself, acting contrary to what he wants and fulfilling Hashem's will. Okay, und das ist einer von den Beuren, was euch bei der Geula Asida wird sein, der Zecher von Yetzias Mitzrayim. This is also one of the explanations why when Mashiach comes, the exodus of Mitzrayim will still be commemorated. Well, the Tachas HaKavana is, as Zal Zayin Beida Milas, because the ultimate purpose is that there should be both qualities. Oich ven mahalt by Hisabcha, even though when a person is at the stage of Hisabcha, the Sichos from the Metzias Adam Betachas Biz, is in ganzen talking Ra. In other words, that a person is at a stage of Hisabcha, a person's nature being fully refined to the point that there can no longer be evil. Zol euch sein die Meile von Hiskafia. He should still have the benefit of Hiskafia, which by that is Gulas Mitzrayim. The bittul from der Adam, which this is the person should have a bittul. Drückt sich eis and Aveda again. This is expressed through Aveda and exertion. So even though obviously loss level will be higher because it's going to be the Aveda of Hisabcha, but there's still a Meile in Hiskafia because you see it's expressed the idea of bittul. And you see this through the Aveda of Aveda and Yigia. Okay, one more paragraph. Ches. The Alter Rebbe is Mazman Teda The Alter Rebbe explains in Teda as das was steht by Gulas Mitzrayim. This that it says by Gulas Mitzrayim, Anechi Alcha Gam Ola, says, I will bring you back up again. Tzvei Aliyis. Now, when it says Alcha Gam Ola, it's a repetitive wording. I will bring you back up, which means this implies two ascents. This alludes to a second ascent, which will occur when Mashiach comes. The Mela moving, so it's understood as Punkt wie der Inyan von Gulas Mitzrayim vet min der Monnen. Vet wirken bei der Gulas Sida, azay is euch lidach Yisas, euch bei Gulas Mitzrayim, darf sich anhören die Aftache wie die Brakadish Baruch, when you get der Gulas Sida. So, we explained that just as by Geula of Egypt will be mentioned after, when Mashiach comes, we're going to mention about the Geula of Mitzrayim, the redemption from Egypt will also, we also by Geula of Mitzrayim, we have to mention also the idea of Geula Asida. He says like this, Das Bara in them. What's the explanation? Wie azay came in Peilen by sich, as euch when der Ra is betokvei, When I feel noch im Brechen sich bleiben weiter der Rabbi Tokvi, wie bei Yitzis Mitzrayim was hat gedarf sein Baracham, how can a person find the strength to battle his evil even when it is strong, and even after overcoming it, it still retains strength, the same as it was by Mitzrayim, and we know it forced the Yidden to leave. So how is it possible that you could fight this? Is Messiah bezed the Akara Ragosha. Say, but the Aveda von Iskafia bringen to Isabcha. This is facilitated by the person recognizing and sensing that his Aveda of Iskafia will eventually lead to Isabcha. Und der Riber, noch Eder es hebt sich an Gulas Mitzrayim, is given the Dibur Veidah wegen Beid Aliyas. So therefore, even before the redemption of Mitzrayim, Hashem already spoke about both Aliyas, both ascents. What did he say? El Chagam Allah. I will bring you back up. He gave a double expression. Oich the Gula Asida, which also refers to the Gula Asida. In other words, we said even by Mitzrayim, he already spoke about the Gula Asida. He already spoke that your Hiskafia will eventually lead to the Isabcha. Okay, we'll continue this tomorrow.